Welcome to everyone who's joined us so far. We'll be getting started at the top of the hour and look forward to sharing more about our topic with you then.
Thank you, Margaret.
Yeah. I know we're excited to get our conversation started, but we promised everybody we'd start at the top of the hour and we don't want to miss anyone. So. I always like to give people a 2-minute warning. It's the sports fan in me. 2-minute warning that we're about to get started, and it's a good time to refresh your coffee, your water, and be ready for us to get started promptly at the top of the hour. Welcome to the folks who have just joined us. We're about a minute out from getting started. I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you.
Thank you, Margaret. We are almost there.
That's right. We have to address this with military precision and start right on time, on schedule.
Yes, especially on this topic.
See, even a couple more folks have joined us. Great, welcome. And we're about to go.
Yes. And let me start the presentation. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anu, and on behalf of Endotronics Avani Group, I'm delighted to welcome you all to this episode of Talent Views, where we talk to thought leaders across the talent acquisition space. Today, we are talking to Margaret O'Donnell from Rutgers Business School, where she manages the Military and Veteran Engagement Program. She'll be talking to us about some ways companies, and specifically staffing companies, can increase the veteran talent in their workforce. Welcome, Margaret. The Endotronics Avani Group is a $100 million staffing and consulting firm spanning 3 continents. I think anything that, technical glitches. Okay. The Endotronics Avani Group, as I was saying, is a $100 million staffing and consulting firm with a global footprint spanning 3 continents. Specifically in terms of veteran talent, 13% of our workforce are veterans as of 2022. This is a 400% increase over the last 4 years that we have been tracking the veterans in our workforce. Now, despite this huge increase in the number of veterans in our consultant base, we can still do way better. And that is why we are so delighted to have Margaret with us today. Margaret, at this point, I'll hand over the stage to you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you so much, Anu. I'm thrilled to be here with you and with our audience today. So I graduated from Rutgers University, and 3 years later, I married into the United States Navy. As a military and then a veteran spouse, I saw some of the challenges that veterans experience when they're seeking employment and always felt passionately about helping veterans. I returned to work at Rutgers more than 20 years ago, but it was about 5 years ago that it became part of my formal responsibilities as the manager of military and veteran engagement programs to work with the student veteran population as well as with companies that had veteran hiring initiatives, military cultural competency training needs, or veteran employee resource groups. And I'm thrilled to be here with you to talk more about what I do.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And I think I met you 5 years back. That was around the time when you had taken over these responsibilities that you're talking about specifically. I'd love to start off with getting an understanding of the Rutgers program for veterans, starting with how Rutgers defines veterans, because I know that there are slight differences in how that is defined.
Sure. So we at the university and at the business school use a very broad and encompassing definition when we talk about our veteran population. So we incorporate active duty, people who are spouses or other dependents like children, National Guardsmen, reservists, and then also the people who you think of traditionally as veterans, people who served a term of active duty, completed that service, and are completely done with the military. So we're very inclusive in our definition and who we serve. The program itself is more service oriented. So, I helped a veteran just yesterday who had an interview that involved pre-recording his responses rather than interacting live with a human. So the responsibilities vary very widely, and I can work with a student veteran who is not even our student yet. They're a prospective student at the applicant stage because I help them receive a waiver of their application fee, or all the way to alumni status where they've already graduated, but maybe they're looking to advance in their role, so forth. So runs the full spectrum. It also runs a spectrum of undergraduate, graduate, MBA, specialty masters. We've even had veterans going through our doctoral programs and then our non-credit programming as well.
Oh, wonderful. That is really one of the most comprehensive programs that I have heard of. So when you're talking about engaging that, is it end to end, right to the point that they get placed to?
Sorry, having some trouble finding my unmute there for a moment. So we don't do a formal placement except in degree programs where that is part of the expectation. But I do a lot with employers who are looking through their veteran hiring initiatives to increase the number of applicants in their pool who are military affiliated, whether that be a veteran, someone who's serving guard or reserve duty, or someone who's a military spouse. So I don't always use the term placement because that's not formally part of my role, but I certainly help make many of those matches, make those introductions, and our very well qualified student veterans take it from there and do the rest, and they get their own placement.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for detailing how the whole program looks. Now, this is where I'd love to hear how small and medium-sized companies can work with programs like yours to help the veteran students, because larger companies have the funding and the resources to build out large programs. But how can small and medium-sized companies do something similar?
Sure. So companies of any size can work with Rutgers Business School's Office of Career Management, which is specific career service for students of the business school. There's also university-wide career services, and those options are prevalent across all universities. They often will have a career services office where you can post jobs electronically, you can attend job fairs and things like that. Those are open to companies of all sizes. Where it might get harder is interacting with veterans in other capacities. So there are organizations like the Student Veterans of America that provide a conference setting where you can be at an expo or you have exposure to their local chapters at each school. There's other specific, an organization like yours might be interested in STEM Veterans USA, where they're working with students and alums of programs that have studied in STEM fields. So very much the technically qualified folks that you might be looking for. And then veteran serving organizations offer many options. So American Legions, VFWs, and you can check out how well qualified and what kind of ratings they have by asking around. Certainly word of mouth is a good referral to find out if you're working with a veteran service organization that's got a great reputation. But there's also formal ways that you can look up, Better Business Bureau type of look up to make sure that you're working with one that's fantastic. But that would be what I recommend.
I love the number of ways that you mentioned that we can work with veteran candidates and build out a proper program. You mentioned how we can touch base with the Office of Career Management at schools. Then there are associations like Student Veterans of America, STEM Veteran USA, then veteran serving organizations. So many of it you've mentioned, and I'm sure there are quite a few. I know some of them, but not all of them, and I'm taking notes as we go along. At this point, I'd also like to mention it to the audience. Please drop your questions into the question Q&A part of the discussion, the chat part. We'll take questions as we go along too. So moving on to one of the other things you did mention already, where are the other ways we can connect with veteran and military affiliated candidates to share the opportunities that we have. So you already went into that a little bit. Can you give us a view into if these organizations will let us share our opportunities, or it is just a place for me to get the database of veterans?
So I think that may be organization specific, that, how their preference is. But I think both are great ways. I didn't mention using social media or having someone that's like me who says, wow, this would be great. Let me take what you've got and share it on my social media. But LinkedIn is obviously one of the places that you'll see not only student veterans because they're encouraged by their school, but that's a great organization that has benefits for people who are in the military. Specific elements of their platform are designed for use by the military community and and veterans. So it's made that way. So that's a great place to do that as well.
I have also found that in social media, very interestingly, I find Instagram a very good place to connect with veteran candidates. Even as I was promoting this event, for example, there are so many large communities, and I had people commenting on the post saying, why don't you advertise this on this group and that group? And they have like thousands, and some even have millions of followers. So to your point, that social media is a very powerful tool.
Yes,
Uh,
and I think you touched on something there too, which is kind of um, uh, that viral aspect,
mhm.
word of mouth that they're hearing when you have someone that you've had a good experience with. They tell someone and they're a trusted source of information, and then it just goes out by layer after layer. So I think that's really important.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I feel that when it comes to jobs and referrals, uh, i- hearing it from someone you trust is one of the most impactful ways which will help you decide, especially at a time when there's so much talent shortage, and they don't necessarily need to go with an Endotronics, but they will if they think that this is a great place for veterans, which helps me segue into the next
Yeah.
question. What can employers do to create a good hiring environment for veterans?
So, one of the things that I recommend is training on military cultural competency. So, that would mean that everyone who's in the um, hiring pipeline, so the people who are recruiting, the people who are interviewing, and the people who are supervising, have an understanding of a couple of things. Maybe it's language and jargon that would be helpful to understand, understanding what's on the resume, what's being described there, um, to understand that even someone who is young and has a limited amount of um, college experience, if they've served in the military, they probably have a good deal of experience in one or both of these things, which would be responsibility for people, so that they may have been a leader of a fire team of a couple of fellow soldiers, airmen, Marines, or sailors. And the other thing is that they may have been responsible for very expensive equipment. So you're talking about someone that you can count on, someone that you can give a good deal of responsibility to. And not every civilian employer would understand that someone who comes to them at a young age with not a college degree and maybe some what seems to them limited experience really might have a lot more responsibility under their belt already, that they could be relied on for a higher level role than they're usually considered for. So I think military cultural competency in that way, and also in a way of knowing what to ask and what not to ask. If someone's had a very high level of security clearance, been in a role that is a very sensitive one, they may not be able to talk about what they did. So tell me about a day in the life of a, you know, whatever. They may not be able to answer that in the way that a typical candidate would. And it would be great for those employers to have an understanding of that and ask questions that do have relevance. Draw out experiences. Another thing about military experience is that everyone is used to talking in we language because they did everything together with their team. And drawing out some individual accomplishments requires some finesse on someone who's interviewing or um, looking at a resume or supervising for the first time. So those are a couple of ways, but our military cultural competency training goes into a lot more detail on that.
Loved that. I loved that response, Margaret, because you touched on so many subtle points, which is different. One of my favorites was the we experience. All of us, especially in the social media world, we are so used to promoting ourselves, I, me, that it is something we need to keep in mind, that someone who is from a veteran background will be speaking more in terms of a we experience. So, and also draw out the experience, understand how that experience is relevant, which again brings me to my next question. When people think of veterans, including me, I'm thinking of someone who is on the battlefront, right? But can you talk to me a little bit about the different roles that veterans can play?
Sure. So I liken, service to something like a hospital, where your initial thought is that a hospital is populated by doctors and nurses. But then you start to think about people who make sure that the supplies are present. Everything that you need instantaneously is there. You think about dealing with billing, there's a financial aspect. But even less considered are the people who do cleaning and who
Mhm.
do cooking. And those are all responsibilities that people hold in the military. Driving, there are a lot of people who would be qualified for jobs that involve driving vehicle, comparable to, for instance, a commercial driver's license or something like that. So those are the lesser known responsibilities of people who serve in the military.
Thank you. It is it's something that I personally had to think through, and I have learned after talking to you. So I thought it might be a relevant point to
Yeah.
mention.
Well,
Uh,
those are called military occupational specialties. And one important point is that if you looked at everyone by their, what they refer to as their MOS, or not forgetting the Navy folks, they're called rates in the Navy. But if you looked at that, you would be missing some of the detail of other responsibilities that they had. So for instance, if someone deploys, they don't necessarily take perhaps in their HR function that may be on a base, they might not take it to a deployment zone. So someone has to act in the role of HR. So many service members are taking on additional responsibilities during their deployment to fill in roles because everything still has to get done, but you don't always have everything and everyone with you on a deployment. So you have to really be ready to shapeshift and take on different roles and do whatever needs to be done.
Thank you, Margaret. In fact, as you were talking about it, I suddenly recollected that the present president of ISM New Jersey, where you and I have met, is someone, he's a veteran, and he was in the supply chain function even in the Air Force, and that's a skill he has migrated to the corporate world too.
Yes, and that brings up a great point that some of the skill sets and some of the MOSs or rates have very logical civilian equivalents in purchasing, procurement, logistics. Those are all examples. Even things like air traffic controllers. Civilians know what that is. We have a civilian equipment, but some people have responsibilities by their military occupational specialty that don't have civilian equivalents, and we probably don't want them to have civilian equivalents. You don't necessarily want a civilian bombardier. um, so we have to find the ways, the things that they did learn in their military training and experiences that are comparable and
Mhm.
usable in a civilian work environment. And there are tons of them. Leadership qualities, things like creative problem solving, all the skills that you want people to have innately, they are getting in the military.
Mm. Thank you, Margaret. That was that's something definitely staffing companies that staff a variety of roles definitely should keep in mind. That's another source of very good quality candidates. One of the challenges that people often talk about in the staffing industry is contract roles are often not the first place that veteran candidates go towards. They want a full-time employment. Now, how can a staffing company like ourselves market contract roles to veterans? Because a huge percentage of these contract employees may and do go on to become full-time employees of those companies. So how can we market a contract position?
So I think that's an excellent point. So someone who served in the military had a very robust um, benefits package, and they're looking for similar security, I think. And I think that's what is such a draw to a full-time role at a company that they recognize, that they consider, strong and steadfast. They've come from one of the largest employers, so they may tend to look for something similar. But they also, the statistics show that people who come out of the military leave their first post-military job at astonishingly high rates. Within the first year, it's usually considered to be at least 50%. And some statistics say that when you get to year 2, it's as much as 85% who leave that very first job. So it might be a good option, and it's one that I've learned more about from you and plan to share with my student veterans and my veteran alumni, to say, why don't you consider trying this out? For a couple of months, you'll get this assignment, and if it works, great. Look for more with that employer. If it works with that, particular employer, maybe you'll like just changing functions just as you did in the military. After 2 or 3 years, you're already training for the next assignment that you'll have. So this is really potentially a very good match for this population, not to mention that some of the employers who are looking are ones who are, for instance, defense contractors, and they're looking for someone who is qualified to receive a security clearance. And that's really often a very good match there. But yeah, I think this trying it out for a certain period of time, and also learning that companies like yours do offer benefits for the time that they're working with them. So I think it's a great potential match that's often overlooked or only considered if they're in the past, if they felt really desperate. Let me find something at least temporarily, and they don't look at it as a term, a contract. They look at it as something that they had to resort to, you know. So yeah, I'll be sharing this as an opportunity, a good opportunity.
Yeah. Uh, the statistics that you shared are mind-blowing. Like 50% leave their first job in the first year, and 85%, up to 85% by year 2. That is astonishing. And to your point, that's where maybe a contract role can be it can help them assess if they are a good fit for this company, this culture, and this kind of job.
Yeah, there's so much that they want to look at with an employer match, like you said, that it's not just what the function is, do they fit into the culture? Some of it's location, and doing contract work allows more flexibility to be in different locations. I have one student veteran who loves the nature of this kind of work, and I'll see him post pictures from different national parks all over the country and so forth. So for the right people, this is the right match. More of them have to know about it.
And another thing, I feel that where we can appeal to veterans, and this is something I learned from Kyle Lawler, who is one of our senior account managers, manages some of the larger clients that we have, which require a lot of veteran talent. So he often says that he himself is a military spouse, and he often says that they are very good in unfamiliar situations.
Yes,
Thrown into a
yes,
project where they don't know anyone, they don't know what's going to happen, they know how to stand on their feet very quickly.
yes. They're taught a certain amount of resiliency that
Mhm.
becomes ingrained, and a stick-to-itiveness, and just here to get the job done, so let's dive in and do it. The other thing is that they can work without a great deal of direct supervision. So
Mhm.
I think there's a perception that people who serve take orders and they do exactly what they are told.
Mhm.
But what really happens is that they follow what is considered the commander's intent. They know what their role is, but what if communications breaks down? They have to
Mhm.
know what they meant, what they wanted, what the end goal
Mhm.
was. So they're really very good at, taking some direction and really moving it ahead, moving things along and making sure things get done.
Now, I love that point. It, in fact, almost at least addresses one of the aspects of the next question I wanted to ask you, and that was what in your experience has been some of the unconscious biases that you have seen employers having when it comes to recruiting veteran talent? You already mentioned one where we think that they are not used to working independently without direct supervision, and that is not true. But
Correct.
if you could talk to a few more points.
Sure. One other example that I'd like to give you about what I consider to be an inaccurate perception is that they're not good at creative problem solving. But
Hmm.
I want everyone to picture an old MASH episode, where they're in this field hospital environment in a war zone and they don't have all the things that they need to, whatever it is, perform a surgery or whatever, but they figure it out. They figure if they take this and they take that and they find the guy who's a welder, they can put them together, um, or use this alternate or trade this. Very, very good at creative problem solving, because they're not always in a situation where they have ideal or full resources. And what are the rest of us dealing with? Situations where we're not as well funded as we'd like to be, we're not as well staffed as we'd like to be. It's the perfect match, really, because they've been used to doing that.
It's creative problem solving. Yes, honestly, it's something that it should strike us. And another point you already mentioned, we all think that veterans are doing certain roles, but in fact, when we were prepping for the call, you mentioned that imagine each of those bases are like little towns, and every
Yes.
role has to be addressed. It's so it's not just certain kinds of roles that they can fit in. They can, and we ourselves have the experience of honestly, when I say 13% of our consultant base are veterans, it spans from IT engineering to manufacturing to even clinical and scientific roles, all kinds of roles. So definitely, that's one of the things employers should remember, that it depends what their skill sets are.
Yes. I was just talking to a Navy veteran yesterday, and she's an optometrist. She was, had a medical specialty in the military. So really very well versed, very, diverse group of training and specializations that could be well used in civilian industry.
Absolutely. Every time I talk to you, I come away sensing the passion that you have for the field. And thank you so much for bringing that passion to today's discussion, too. At this point, I know we are at 1:30, but I do want to
It
ask
went
the
so
audience.
fast.
I know, but it did. I didn't even finish all the questions I had for you. But I do want to ask the audience if they have any questions that we did not address. While we wait for any questions to come along, any final thoughts, Margaret?
Well, it's funny that you used the word passion because I really had intended to close today by thanking you for allowing me to talk about something that I'm so passionate about. So I'm glad that you saw that that I was so passionate. And that Navy veteran that I was talking about, who I spoke to yesterday, she wrote down something that I said to her, which was, I felt like the luckiest person when my paycheck and my passion collided, and I, hold this role as the manager of military and veteran engagement programs at Rutgers Business School. So yeah, I feel very lucky to do what I do because I feel like I serve the people who have served and who are serving.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I do not see any questions in the chat. Maybe we had a very comprehensive discussion. I very much doubt that. I'm sure people have questions, and
Well, if they'd
when
like to ask me questions privately, sometimes a venue like this is not where they want to present a question. I would encourage them to look me up on LinkedIn.
okay.
Margaret O'Donnell and Rutgers in the search bar. I'm usually the first one that comes up if you do that. And
Uh-huh.
I look like me. It's another picture of me with crazy curly red hair. So,
Uh-huh.
so you'll know it's me.
Thank you so much. What I will do is after this call, when the thank you message goes out to all the attendees, I will, if you're okay with it, I will send them your LinkedIn profile so they can connect with you
Absolutely.
and ask any questions that they need to.
I
Uh,
would be very happy to.
Thank you so much, and I hope you'll visit us again.
Well, thank you. Over the past couple of years that I've known you, you have really embraced and shared my passion to serve the veteran community better. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all the audience. I would like to share the many ways that all of you can keep in touch with us. Okay, so you can connect with us. Our website is iic.com. You can email us at webinars@iic.com. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook as Indotronics Avani Group. We look forward to hearing from all of you, and thank you so much for attending today's fireside chat. Thank you, and thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.